Okay, I guess we'll get started. Thank you all for coming to the Military History Series, and I hope to see you in the future. Our next presentation, by the way, I'm going to say this up front, so in case somebody runs out at the end without hearing it, will be in October, and we'll be notifying you. If you're not already on our list, please see Doug Bell over here after the presentation, and he'll put you on our notification list. Many of you see the thing the library puts out, but if you want to be individually notified about the presentation, subject, etc., please see Doug about that, and we'll make sure that happens. So today we're very, very pleased that we can take a look at the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm sure that all of you are aware of the anniversary, and I'm going to let Richard introduce the speaker here, but thank you very much for coming. Oh, badges. I'm sorry. If you have your badge, please conceal it, because it will be taped. Thanks, Doug.
Well, good afternoon again. I'm Dr. Richard Stewart, Chief Historian, U.S. Army Center of Military History, one of the publishers of this campaign pamphlet that you see in the back. By all means, get your copy as you're leaving. No charge. Today is, as you know, the 150th anniversary of the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. A truly titanic three-day struggle that ended the South's second invasion of the North. It was our greatest and most costly battle, and the most costly battle of the entire Civil War. Not the single day, but throughout the course of the 3 days, the most costly battle and it deserves our study and our remembrance. To talk to you today about different aspects of that battle, specifically the regular army at Gettysburg, often overlooked, I would like to introduce to you today Professor Carol Reardon, who, at least to military historians in the United States and frankly the world, really needs no introduction, but if there are a few non-military historians in the audience, I will go into some detail about her. Professor Reardon obtained her PhD in history from the University of Kentucky in 1987 and is currently the George Winfrey Professor of American History at Penn State University, a university she's been closely affiliated with since 1991. She has also been the General Harold K. Johnson, a visiting professor of military history at the U.S. Army War College in 1993-94, and again from 2001 to 2012, and a visiting professor of military history at the U.S. Military Academy from 1999 to 2000. She is a past president and vice president of the Society for Military History, America's and the world's premier military history society. In addition, Professor Reardon has always been available to lend her advice and assistance to the military and has served on boards of visitors to the Marine Corps University and on our own Department of the Army Historical Advisory Committee, doing great service for our country. Among our many publications are a study of military thought in the Civil War from the Union perspective, an analysis of a naval aviation squadron in the Vietnam War, and a number of different conflicts, the papers of Henry Clay, and two other major books on warfare entitled, one, Soldiers and Scholars, the U.S. Army and the Uses of Military History. That's nonfiction, right? Good.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Okay, we hope so. And Pickett's Charge in History and Memory, not to be carried into North Carolina. And of course, with Tom Vossler, the Gettysburg campaign brochure in the U.S. Army Center of Military History's Campaigns of the American Army series, which you have in front of you now, I hope. Pick it up on the way out. I might also add that for the first 10 of you who come up to me after this presentation, I have the newest thing, the newest campaign, Vicksburg, that other battle that took place in July of 1863, that brought to the fore not just a great victory on the 4th of July, 1863, making Lincoln feel very comfortable about things, but also brought Ulysses S. Grant to the nation's attention, and he would soon be heading east to settle things with Lee and his minions at that time. But first, let's go down to Gettysburg, and please, a warm welcome for Professor Carol Reardon.
Thank you, Richard. We have to do this in rather unorthodox fashion, since you can't see me back here. Good afternoon, everyone. When I left Gettysburg this morning, I left with the echo of artillery in my ears. It is July 1st. The throngs have arrived, and it's a great day to be up there. I'll be returning shortly to the chaos that is Gettysburg right now. Today, of course, is day one of what's going to be a week-long celebration, commemoration for us up at Gettysburg. But today, on July 1, what they will be talking about today is the fight of the 24th Michigan, 2nd, 6th, and 7th Wisconsin, and 19th Indiana of the Iron Brigade. Or they will be talking about the stand of the 149th and 150th Pennsylvania, Stone's Brigade on the McPherson Farm. Or they will talk about the last stand of the 16th Maine Infantry that allowed 2 whole brigades to withdraw to Cemetery Hill at the end of the day's fighting. As you may have noticed, I gave you a lot of state names, but I did not once mention the United States Army. Usually when we talk about the Battle of Gettysburg, when we talk about Civil War battlefields or Civil War battles in general, we talk about armies of citizen soldiers. We talk about the soldiers who belong to these various states. We forget that, in fact, sometimes that there was a United States regular army that provided a backbone to the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg. And in fact, without their presence, without their expertise, this victory at Gettysburg might not have happened the way it did. The title of today's talk, Waterloo Eclipsed, came from a newspaper headline on July the 6th. The Army of the Potomac had not had much luck facing Robert E. Lee. For over 13 months now, they have lost every battle that they've fought, tying only at Antietam perhaps. Gettysburg was the first big win, and the Northerners were euphoric. Waterloo Eclipsed sure is hyperbole, but it's not unique in the sentiment that spread throughout the North. When the battle was over, there were an awful lot of soldiers who wanted to claim for themselves or for their unit the greatest claim of battle laurels for the victory. But Abraham Lincoln kind of quashed that by saying quite simply, with the victory at Gettysburg, there was glory enough for all. And for a long time, we were willing to accept that and run with it. But in time, it became more and more important to figure out exactly why the Union Army won. It took us a long time to get to that point, because frankly, the Southerners took over control of the narrative of Gettysburg. And for many, many years, when staff ride groups would come to Gettysburg, and I'm willing to bet a lot of you were there, you talked about Robert E. Lee, his decisions, how Lee lost the battle. And you probably didn't give that much thought to General Meade and the Army of the Potomac and how they won it. We've started to force groups of soldiers who come up to start thinking about both armies. And of course, that will help to lead us to where we want to be today, the U.S. Regular Army at Gettysburg. If you aren't familiar with this monument, I hope you will be. You'll recognize it the next time you go up. If you don't recognize the monument, that's okay, but do you recognize the trees that are behind it? That's the famous clump of trees, the copse of trees, the trees toward which Pickett's charge advanced. Probably the most recognized cluster of trees in North America. But that monument is the monument to the United States Regular Army. It doesn't get too many visitors. Not too many people know really what it is. They get caught up in the story of Webb's Philadelphia Brigade and some of the others who were players on that spot on July 3rd. And usually when I see groups around the United States Regulars Monument, they're mostly using the front steps as a place to sit down. Now, okay, I'm guilty of doing that on staff rides too, but there's a bigger story here, and that's what I hope to share with you today. When the campaign began, of course, the commander of the Union Army was General Joseph Hooker. He is the man who got soundly beaten by Robert E. Lee at the Battle of Chancellorsville in May of 1863. As Lee began his march north, he really stole a march on Hooker. Hooker found himself south of Lee. And that put him in a bit of a panic. There was constant stream of telegrams heading back to the War Department, to General Halleck, and even to President Lincoln, asking for more troops, more supplies, more authority. The man had begun basically to panic. When he doesn't have any stress facing him, Hooker was as solid could be. But he did tend to break when the stress became too big. At the first day at Chancellorsville, everything had started out really well, but when he met resistance that he did not expect, Hooker had called all his men back to the Chancellorsville clearing. One of his senior subordinates had said, "If we can't hold the high ground, how can we hold the low ground behind us?" Joe Hooker was asked about 20 years later why he lost at Chancellorsville. And he said, very tellingly, "I think I just lost confidence in old Joe Hooker." It tells you a whole lot about the man. He has a break point, and unfortunately, he can reach it fairly easily. And it seemed fairly clear to Lincoln that he was getting awfully close to it late in June of 1863. On the 27th of June, General Hooker sent a message back to General Halleck, the commander of the United States Army here in Washington, asking to be relieved. The message had a timestamp of 1 o'clock. It was received at the War Department back here in Washington at 3. Coming from a camp in Virginia, that was moving pretty quickly. General Halleck read it, and he sent back a message saying, I do not have the authority to relieve you. You were appointed by the President through the Secretary of War. You will have to, they will have to make this decision. The decision was apparently made by 8 o'clock that evening, because a message went out to General Halleck saying, prepare an officer to carry some special orders to the Army for us. Well, the handwriting was on the wall. The order relieving General Hooker from command of the Army of the Potomac was dated the same day he asked for relief. So that was a very quick decision. The man who's going to take command is General George Gordon Meade. West Point graduate and an engineer. Before the war, he had no combat experience whatsoever. This was the man you went to if you wanted to build a lighthouse. He was an engineer. He's built a number of really excellent lighthouses, some of which still stand today, but this is not a man that at the beginning of the war you would have identified as a top flight combat commander. He is going to be wounded seriously in action during the 7 Days campaign. He will rise from brigade through division to corps command. And now he is in his tent outside Frederick, Maryland. At 3 o'clock in the morning, a man shows up in his tent wearing civilian clothes. And at first, General Meade wonders, why is this stranger in my tent in civilian clothes at 3 a.m.? When the man took off his hat, Meade all of a sudden recognized that this is a colonel that's coming from Secretary of War Stanton's office. And the message was simply, I'm here from Washington, and I'm here to bring you trouble. General Meade wrote a lot of letters to his wife, and he wrote all about this the next night. He said, I immediately began to think back on my recent actions, wonder who I might have offended, and tried to figure out if I was being relieved or arrested. He mentioned that to Colonel Hardee, and Colonel Hardee said, no, it's much worse than that. I'm about to offer you command of the Army of the Potomac. Now, Meade didn't say it, but I sort of envision him sitting there saying, arrest me, it's easier. Because it just hasn't been easy to be the commander of the Army of the Potomac. About 8 o'clock in the morning, General Meade will put on his best uniform, and accompanied by Colonel Hardee, they will go over to General Hooker's headquarters. And as soon as they arrived, General Hooker knew what that visit meant. Not so much because Meade was there, but he knew who Hardee was and what that likely meant. He packed up his headquarters, and except for a very brief meeting, he and his staff prepared to depart for Baltimore. Now notice I say he and his staff. General Meade stepped in and interposed, and he said, General Hooker, if you want to take your personal staff with you, that's fine, but there are a few folks I really need to stay here. There is an army to run here. We need to keep focused on the mission. There are Confederates north of us, and I need the help of the Army staff. Well, Hooker left, and he took his personal staff with him, but the professionals stayed. And these are the folks who never get a place in the Gettysburg narrative. Well, they do. They show up sort of in spots here and there, but some of them don't. And so today, we're going to introduce you to the staff of the Army of the Potomac, the men who really created the foundation for the victory. A chance not to just talk about the combat commanders, who many of you are already familiar with, but the people who are doing the other essential work that helps victory come around. Now here's the one who maybe a number of you are familiar with. The most important person on a Civil War staff is someone who is designated the Chief of Staff. He would function much the way an operations officer would right now. He is the one who's going to take the commander's vision, write up orders, come up with a plan that's going to make it happen. He's easily the most important person on the staff. General Dan Butterfield, you might recognize as the author of the bugle call Taps. He was also responsible for establishing that series of corps symbols, the corps badges that the soldiers wore on their caps. Those of you who are wearing patches on your sleeves that designate your division or some other command, here's the man who basically developed the concept back in the spring of 1863. He is not without talent. He is not without some knowledge. What he has a problem with, however, is more along the line of character. When we talk about leadership, we talk about the importance of courage, character, and competence. This man has shown plenty of courage in battle. He's been a combat commander. He has shown plenty of competence in the work that he will do. It's in character where he tends to fall off a little bit. This man is a friend, a personal friend of Joseph Hooker. He is not happy that his boss has gone. He is not happy that Meade has asked him to stay. He is not happy because he doesn't like Meade, and frankly, General Meade doesn't really like Butterfield. They've interacted before, and long before General Meade ever knew he would be in the position he was in, he had already come up with a few notions about Butterfield. I don't have too many quotes, but I think this one tells you a whole lot. General Meade wrote this to his wife. "I believe General Hooker is a good soldier. The danger he runs is of subjecting himself to bad influences like Dan Butterfield, who, being intellectually more clever than Hooker and leading him to believe he's very influential, will obtain an injurious ascendancy over him and insensibly affect his conduct." Well, you can see that Meade already has some issues here. He is going to actually consider replacing him. He will talk to at least 2 senior officers, but both of them say the same thing. "Sir, I'm flattered, but right now we are an army on the move. I can serve you better in my current function. You need what he knows in his head right now about dispositions, both our own and what the enemy is planning. You have to keep him on." Now, we'll say this for Butterfield. For the next week, while the Battle of Gettysburg goes on, this man will